I got married to him, and he probably was not the most ideal person. If I look at who I am now, I would never have chosen this man. If I look at who I am now, but that girl was so bruised and so hurt and so beaten. He was what I needed. He was bruised and hurt and not the ideal person, but I didn't know better. I got what I needed.
Hello, everyone. This is Teray Holmes from Lily and Eve, a lifestyle brand for women with style and grace. And I am so excited to be here on the Teray Holmes Show, sponsored by Lily and Eve, and have my most amazing guest, Lucinda Douglas, hailing all the way from the Netherlands. And Lucinda is just amazing all the way around. And I wanted to introduce her to my tribe, my friends, because when you get a little dose of Lucinda, you leave full. You leave completely full. I'm telling you. And so Lucinda, let me tell you a little bit about her. So Lucinda hails from the Netherlands. She's an advisor. She speaks and mentors women worldwide. And she is known in Europe as the Yes You Can woman. And she's going to talk to us about what makes her the Yes You Can woman. Lucinda was born in Cape Town during the South African apartheid era. And she learned to transform adversity into success. And she's going to talk to you about that, or talk to us about that. I love talking to Lucinda. She's one of my most favorite people in the world. We met online in the Lisa Nichols world. If you don't know Lisa Nichols, you should. We met Speaking Right to Make Millions, a group there. And I just loved her from the very beginning. So Lucinda, thank you for joining me for this conversation today.
Teray Holmes, it is that I'd keep my mouth shut, but you know that I find you the most amazing woman. I mean, the mere fact that everything you've done, everything you do, there is so much, you don't stop at 90%, you go to 150. And it doesn't matter, where you've come from and where you've progressed to. I always say to people, I wish you could meet Teray Holmes. And now, when you invited me, I was thinking, I want to know all about life around you for the past couple of years.
Well, you should be interviewing me.
I'm sorry. I'm going to, because I'm going to start my podcast, and it's called I Believe, because I believe that whatever your belief system is, it's the way you think, the way you handle, and it's the outcome of whatever the fruits of your life may be.
That makes me think about a book I'm currently reading called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, right? And it's all about your beliefs, and what you believe, manifests in what you think, and what you think manifests in how you live.
Yes. Oh, you're going to write that down for me, because that's exactly, I'm going to listen to this again. That's exactly what it is. And I'm curious, because we were just talking about our bodies, and I was saying, we're talking about bodies and bodies of women, yes, and bodies in Corona time, and bodies. People believe such things about themselves, mentally, physically, the cognitive capacities, and all these beliefs become exactly what they shouldn't be. So people, and those kind of things that I think is such a marvel. And I'm not only going to interview women, I'm going to interview men as well, to discover, is there something about their beliefs that is different? Whose beliefs works the best? All those kind of things. It's just, how close can you get to somebody's being, basically?
Yes. And the thing is that we don't realize that our beliefs are created by our experiences, right? Yeah. So many of the things you believe come from the things you have experienced. And when you have not had the best experiences in life, or when you have lived life, the power of your subconscious mind is really about what belief systems, what things have you programmed into your mind that you are now acting out and it's manifesting in your physical body, manifesting in disease, manifesting in dis-ease, right?
Yes.
And so that I love that concept is the most amazing concept. And my mentor, one of my mentors, always says to me that it's not about what you're able to do. We really look at ourselves as, what am I able to do? Like, what I get up in the morning and how do I feel and what am I able to do? Well, the true essence of what you're able to do does not lie in that question. It lies in your capacity. What is your capacity? And we never think about ourselves in terms of our capacity. And our capacity is far greater than what we think we're able to do.
Yes. Oh, woman, I say amen.
Hallelujah.
That's how inspiring session one, the first sentence is. But you're so right. And so many people believe the lies that have become the truths over the years. And all these things have only limited them and limited their capacities, even their imagination has been limited, whereby everybody else seems to be running the race and they are sitting on the sideline, as they are not able to get into the race and say, hey, I'm partaking, whether I'm walking, strolling, crawling, that part, just do it. Just participate.
So Lucinda, so you bring me to a very interesting segue, as you always do. So I was reading your story from the only 21 stories you will ever need to be successful in life and business. And I was reading your story this morning, which is called Power Play. And I was completely fascinated because in this story, you talk about how you pushed yourself past what most would consider a limited belief system, that women cannot operate in a man's world, that if you take on the qualities and attributes of a man, right? Because you talk about this in the book, that it somehow makes you lesser than, but you really, this story is just a marvel because it is really, when you talk about pushing past your capacity, like you pushed yourself to such a limit and you basically said, there are no boundaries, there are no rules, there are no limitations. I am going to create a job for myself. And I am going to walk in here with these, however many men there were in that room. And I am going to not demand, but I am going to state my case, stand my ground, stand confidently in my truth, and I'm going to get this job. Tell us about what sparked that.
Necessity and desire. You know that feeling when you have the feeling that you can actually do more and you can actually be of more meaning, but you don't know how to get there.
Yes.
Okay, so this is something that at that moment in time, it really frustrated me because we're talking about 2012, 2013. And that is one of the phenomena in my life that was starting to get to me. And I had no answers as to how to get somewhere, not knowing how to get there, but being a little bit annoyed and a little bit frustrated about it. And that little bit, you can increase that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who was going to help me. I just didn't know how to get out of it or how to get into it. And then I saw my opportunity and I saw my chance. So all of a sudden, there was this situation that had occurred. The commercial director had left the company, a relatively big company, and I knew I could do his job. The only thing was the other people were not convinced that I could do it. And I knew that they were not convinced because I wasn't even on the long list, of possible people to have the job.
And in your book, you say you didn't even have the experience per se.
I didn't. And now when I speak to women now, I say to them, I just said it yesterday as well. I said, I had promised myself after that experience that I would never do things I've done before, because how uninteresting is it to do things that you've done before? I mean, life is all about learning new skills. And new skills means I have to do things I've never done before. Unqualified, disqualified, qualified, I don't care. So that is basically what I had adopted as a belief. You know, I believed that I could do this. I just didn't know how. Wow. The job. And I thought if I would keep going at that idea, and I had nothing to lose, because at that moment in time, I had my company going, and it was just not where I wanted to be. So I knew there was nobody else getting me to where I needed to be. I needed to do something, because action creates reaction. And I didn't know what reaction I was looking for, but I knew I was looking for action. Yeah. I needed that action because that action was going to make the difference.
Yes.
And then in that conversation that we'd had, because that offered me the possibility to come, or at least I invited myself. I dropped the telephone. I hung up before they could say no. So I had to come.
And so let's take us back. Take us back. So you called who, and you said what?
Well, I was at that moment in time, I was on holiday, and it was a Sunday afternoon. So what I see, I don't know if telephones still work like that, but what I'd seen was there was a change in number in my telephone, and I got a message saying this and this person, probably it's just something I'd seen at that moment in time. He had changed his number, or had sent a message, my number has changed. And I knew, because I was talking to this company, the commercial director and the general director, about training their salespeople, because I just started my company called Clients for Clients, and I was training salespeople to become better at their work. And all of a sudden, I had seen this message, and then automatically, I sent a message to the general director of the company, and I said to him, Jan, I said, I see that your commercial director has just left the company. I want his job. I will be there at 11 o'clock on Tuesday morning. But just to be sure that I'll be there, I'll just call you now anyway. So there was me writing. I said, well, great that you're picking up your telephone the Sunday. I'll be there on Tuesday because I have to leave France right now. It was a drive over like 18 hours. And it wasn't even the end of my holiday, but I thought it's my chance. And he didn't have the chance to say no. I didn't give him the opportunity. I didn't ask permission. I gave myself the permission. I needed it. You see, I didn't have the luxury, and lots of people probably have the luxurious positions where they don't have to be this clear.
Yeah.
I needed to be really clear. And I couldn't afford for him to say no. It just wasn't one of my options that I needed. So when I got there on Tuesday morning, I had this little tiny car. So I parked my car around the corner. I think lots of people understand this. This car wasn't up to the job that I wanted. So I couldn't park the car. And I think lots of people really understand that as well. Yes. But I thought, I got here. That car brought me here. So yes. I needed to move upstairs. And when I came upstairs, there was an oval table with 8 men. And oh my goodness, it was like, there's this beautiful saying that defense is the best mechanism. So the first thing I said when I walked in the room and I saw this, I said, oh, people, I have an hour. You have an hour the time to decide whether I become the commercial director, because after this, I have a different appointment. And I knew I had to say something, and of course, afterwards, it was really ridiculous something to say to Ray. I had
that was so bold. That was so bold.
Yes.
And Lisa Nichols always says how, you don't need permission from anyone, right? And so I love when you say, I gave myself permission. I gave myself permission and to be bold. I did not give them an opportunity to say no. I told them what I wanted, and I showed up, and I parked my little bitty car around the corner because it didn't reflect the type of role that I was asking them to give to me. Love it.
I knew they were not going to run outside to check out my car because I was there, I was present. And, there were moments in that conversation, because that conversation changed my entire look at myself. So what happens in this conversation is there are 8 men who now have given them an hour to decide whether I become the commercial director of an international organization, transport and logistics, and there's never been a woman on the board. So of course they are thinking, let's not do this, because we all like to do things we've done before, and we all like the comfort of how things have always been.
Yes.
So I said to them, eventually they were having this, they said to me, so how do you intend to get the profit up by 40%? And I said, listen, I have one possibility, and that is if I would tell you how I would do it, you wouldn't need me. I need,
Wow.
you know,
Wow.
there were just these words coming out of my mouth, because I had told myself and promised myself when I was driving there, I was not going to leave without this job.
Wow. Lucinda, what you just said, that right there, I hope people caught that.
I hope so too.
That if I tell you what I plan to do, then why should you hire me? You won't need me. And how many times, I know personally, I know how many times I've given away so much information with clients, coaching clients, right? Yes. Potential coaching clients, to the point where they no longer needed me.
Yes.
That right there, that sells.
Well, it's, you know, yes. Well, I had no choice. I think the whole idea was, the promise I'd made to myself was so, I was just not going to drive home without realizing the promise I'd made to myself. So every answer that I'd given them wasn't going to be an answer that I would jeopardize myself with. It was going to be the answer that I was going to get the job with.
Wow.
And eventually they said, as there comes a moment in time where somebody says, you know, because they asked me all these questions and we're having a good conversation. And eventually somebody says, Lucinda, could you get us some coffee? And I said, the only thing I said was, could you please put sugar in my coffee as well? And then the tables were turned, because I knew that I wasn't going to get anybody's coffee. So I said to him, it's a good idea. Could you get me 2 sugars in my coffee too? I don't drink sugar in my coffee. But I needed to make that remark for him to understand he was getting the coffee and not me.
Oh my God. Let me tell you, I read the rest of that story, and she got that job, stayed there for a year, transformed her life and transformed her business. That is why she is known as the Yes You Can woman. So I want to talk about your story, because the Yes You Can woman, that's your autobiography, right?
Right.
And so how important is your story to your business?
Very much so, because no, differently. I needed her. I wrote my autobiography in 2018, and I needed to tell my story, because lots of people were saying to me at that moment in time, oh, but Lucinda, everything seems to go so hunky-dory for you. You seem to have everything so well arranged. You probably don't know how difficult it is when you're standing on my side. I got so frustrated. I was a little bit annoyed with these people, because they were thinking that because life had eventually looked like this at that moment in time, that I'd never known hardship, working hard, doing things in a different way. They thought I was in every magazine and every cover, and I was in newspapers. So they thought that I'd always had this position. And my autobiography was my document to myself and to them, and especially to myself, letting me see and letting me understand where I came from and where I'd been, where I come to at that moment in time. So, you know, when people would say, oh, but, you know, I would say to them, well, here's my book. I hope that your inspiring story is just as inspiring as mine as well. The mission. And so, I mean, you know, eventually, if I look at what I do today, it's so much more relaxed, because I don't have to prove anything anymore to Ray.
Did the book do that for you? Did the book open up that? Did the book create that connection for people? So, because when people see you, it's funny, you know, when you and I, you know, were talking earlier, you were saying, oh, Teray, you know, when you do things at 150, and, you know, I love watching you, right? And I'll be honest, I don't always feel like the success that other people see me as, right? Because
Right.
I know the internal struggles. I know the story behind the story. I know the storms I went through to get me to this, what you think is this paradise, right? You see the rainbow, I went through the storm. Okay.
I love
So,
that.
right. You see the rainbow, you know? And so, did writing your story somehow help to validate you with people and so that they would feel comfortable enough to say, okay, I can trust Lucinda because she's experienced some of the same things I've experienced?
Yes. But yes, it did. It gave, I think I received more replies from people who had read the book. They were, they were so, they weren't reading me, they were reading themselves, by the way, because they used to send me 3 A4s as to how they had experienced their lives and what
Yeah.
they brought them and meant for them. I thought, whoa, I had to also say to people, I'm not a therapist, but I'm so flattered. I'm so flattered that you're sharing this with me. It's amazing. But
Yeah.
it put me somewhere else as well. I needed that at that moment in time. I needed to share my story and I needed to put it out there because you're always sharing bits of your story, but you never share that, that you're looking into the mirror and you're looking in this book and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I hope this and this person doesn't really read it because it's so intense. It is so your soul. You are allowing people to look at your soul. But I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it because if I could do it, I could expect from others to give me that as well.
You know, so you know a little bit about my story.
A little bit. Your story is amazing. It's the first story in the book. Not for nothing. For good reason.
Right. So for people who don't know, I am one of the authors. I think I'm the only American author in the book, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so the book is the only 21 stories you will ever need to be successful in life and business. And Lucinda says she loved my story so much she made it the first story in the book. And
Yes.
and so part of my story. But interestingly enough, when you talk about, you told the story because you needed it, and then when you wrote some of the things in that story, they probably like made you cringe a little bit, right? And just remembering, and so interestingly, I started going to a new therapist because COVID has,
I understand.
because COVID has, made a sister realize, okay, it's time to do some self-care, and part of self-care is mental health.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so started going to this new therapist, and the very first session, she had me to, it was 90 minutes of tell me your life story.
Ooh.
And I started from beginning to end. And I had never told my story from beginning to end, right? Not from beginning to now. And so when you talk about when you wrote some of those things and you yourself were just sort of like, oof, oh man, that's a lot. When I told her that story, I had never told it from beginning to now.
Wow.
And it touched me. It was so profound that my therapist started crying.
Yes.
And we literally were crying together. I've never had a moment like that in my life. So when you talk about telling that story, I sometimes grapple with telling my story because I'm like, oh, there was a lot of pain. How do I write a story all about pain because there was so much pain, but there were so many lessons learned through the pain. They were learned over time. They were sometimes learned much later in life, but there were a ton of lessons learned. But so I ask you this question because I know that part of your story is losing your husband at a young age. Can you tell us a little bit about that and tell us like, how much of your pain do you share? Because people want to hear that everything's always been great, like you said. Right?
Yes.
They want to hear that everything's always been great. But how much of your pain do you share before it feels like, okay, this is a lot? Or do you just share it and then just let it go?
Um, that's a really soul-searching question, and yet I share it, and sometimes I cry while sharing it.
Mm,
I cry and I cry, and I love it because I know that I'm doing it from the bottom of my heart.
yeah.
And at a certain moment in time, when I told that story, I even stopped crying, and I thought, oh, I can't tell the story anymore. The story
Mm,
has been, it's finished. This part of the
wow.
story is finished. And what had
Mm,
happened was, um, I was just saying it this morning, and it's probably one of the cruelest things to say to somebody, but it's one of the most honest moments in my life. I I got married to him, and he probably was not the most ideal person. If I look at who I am now, I would never have chosen this man, if I look at who I am now. But
absolutely.
that girl was so bruised and so hurt and so beaten. He was what I needed. He was bruised and hurt and not the ideal person, but I didn't know better. I got what I needed.
He could
And
relate to you at that moment in your life.
yes, but
Yeah.
I especially, I could relate to him. So I mean,
Yes.
and that's what I said. I just said it this morning to a woman. I said to her, she was telling me about this husband of hers, and she got divorced from him. And I said, he's not all bad, because he was what you needed at that moment in time. And when
Mm,
you grow and when you heal and when you get to a different place, he is not the person that you would have chosen.
mm.
And that is a story I told a few times, and I dried my tears one day, and I thought, this is true, and I wrote it in my book as well. And he was what I needed.
Mm.
And that means that just saying that in so many ways was so good for me. And so I started looking at, but what do I need? Because that was absolutely with the environment that I came from was unsafe, unstable. There was no knowing what tomorrow would bring.
Hmm.
So I had hoped to find a life where somebody was going to look out for my tomorrow.
Wow.
So, so your ex-husband, well, not ex, but your deceased husband
Mhm.
was what you needed at that time in your life. And you said,
Yes.
had you been the Lucinda you are now, you would have never chosen him, right? And so,
Yes.
and I think that a lot of people can relate to that. A lot can relate to choosing someone based on where you are now,
Yes.
not and not that you choose the wrong person, because that's the right person for where you are right now,
Yes.
and that person is a reflection of where you are
Yes.
right now, which
He's your
is so
mirror.
he's your mirror, and which is so interesting because um I found that in my dating journey that I met the happiest and most sincere people and grounded people when I was my most happiest. And yeah,
Oh, why
yes.
doesn't that surprise anybody?
Hello. And
Yes.
so, I I was talking to someone and they were talking about marriage being a box and that it's an empty box. It has nothing in it, but people expect it to have so many things in it. But marriage and relationships, and so I just say relationships in general, they are empty boxes and we bring everything to them. We create the box, we create the relationship, we create the love. And when we have nothing, when we're broken, that's what the marriage is. That's what
Yes.
the relationship is. It is what we bring to it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. There is nothing about what you're saying that is untrue. That is why you need to be fulfilled. You need to be a complete person, not perfect, but you also have to understand that the two of you have to also want to get to a certain point. And these things have to be spoken about before you decide to start this relationship. I think I see lots of people, my sister, for example, her relationships never work. And I've had conversations with her, and I know why they don't work. She always says, well, we'll see where it ends up. And I said, don't say that. Have a certain goal as to where you want that this is going to go to. Don't let all these things just happen. You are not just somebody things are not just happening to you. You can realize a whole lot about what is happening in your life, not everything. Thank goodness that God is there, that we don't have to have everything sorted out to the T. But we need to also understand our value, because that's basically what it's about. It's how valuable do you find yourself and where do you want to be? But you need to know yourself, and you need to know what you want before you can possibly get there.
I love that, because it really goes back to even that job that you walked in with. Listen, I'm not going in here to see where it goes. No. I'm going in here to get the job. And so even as it pertains to relationships, we're not getting married. We're not getting in relationships. We don't have friendships or whatever to see where they go. We have them to create lives and experiences together.
Exactly.
And moments together, right?
Yes.
And so I love that concept. So I have so many questions for you. There's never enough time to talk to you, Lucinda Douglas. Never enough time. Okay.
Teray Holmes, that's why I'm going to interview you the next time, because I find you fascinating. The same questions you ask me, I can just imagine how amazing it's going to be. So it goes both ways. But you ask me, I ask you.
It's juicy. So, oh my God. So I remember you saying something when you were talking about going into that conference room with those guys, and just before you went in, you were saying, like, who's going to help me, because your business wasn't exactly where you needed it to be. Life was just a little uncertain, and you were thinking, like, who's going to help me? And I love that, because you came back to it and you realize that Lucinda had to help Lucinda.
At that moment in time, Lucinda had to help Lucinda.
Yes. And so often we look for that outside ourselves. We look for help outside of ourselves, not realizing that everything we need is inside of us already. Right? Whether it is, we already have a resource, we already have somebody that we could call who knows somebody who could get us to somebody else. We already have enough skills, and we could create opportunities for ourselves. And Lisa Nichols, who, I mentioned before, she says that, you have to be your own rescue.
Yes.
Right. And you have been your own rescue. So I want to ask you this question. So, we're dealing with COVID and the global pandemic, global, right? Pandemic. So you're being affected in Amsterdam. I'm being affected in Maryland, people all over the world, right? How fascinating is that, though, that we get to experience this? I mean, like, some people look at the negative aspect of it, but there's so much power in experiencing something across the globe with everyone and being connected through one thing, right? So my question is, how has it affected you, and how are you pivoting in life? Like, what have been your pivots in your personal life? And then we'll get to business.
Okay, this is great. I don't think I can keep it loose and separate from the business, but let me try. Everything was going very well. I think just as 3/4 of the world in business, I was really thinking 2020 is going to be my year. I had it all organized in 2019. This was going to be the year I was going to extrapolate. It was going to just happen.
Yeah.
And so then I know in January I was in Marrakesh in Morocco, and in February I was in Valencia. It's my favorite place in the world, I think. And everything was going great. And all of a sudden it was time to go back home in the beginning of March, and the world had changed. The news articles and items had changed. And I thought, oh, well, this probably just blow over. Let me go home and see what happens. And this pandemic, the media everything had just hit me, and I knew my business, it was going to go somewhere totally different. My life was going to take a different role. And what I'd done was I decided to go back to school.
Wow.
I decided I was it was no back to school. It's well quite interesting. I decided to go and study theology.
Whoa.
So
where have I been? Where have I been? How did I miss this? Like, where have I been? Okay, go
See,
ahead.
we haven't spoken. So that is the first thing I did. And I thought, okay, perfect. I need to go to school. I need to go to class. So I can't do this online. So I'm just going to wait until the moment comes that I can go to class. And that moment didn't come. So in September, I thought, well, I had to register because it's been on my list since March. And in September, I registered. And so now I'm in my first year of theology, which is absolutely great.
Oh,
so what happens is in back to March, I was walking around my office and walking around at home for like 2 weeks. And I knew I had to move to a different galaxy, basically. That's what it felt like. I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to transition.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided, okay, let's start with moving things literally, physically. Okay, that works.
Let me back up. Why did you have to move to a different galaxy, literally, figuratively?
Well, because I love having this, I love meeting people physically. And for you in the States, it's already been something very normal to work online. And because I live in this littlest country in the world, as big as the Kruger National Park, there's never been a reason to move online, because you could find every lion and every tiger, literally physically.
Yeah.
So the moment came that I had to move in a different galaxy and move online. And I had to really love it as well, because if I wasn't going to love it, it wasn't going to work. And I did. So what I decided, the first thing I did after 2 weeks was I decided I was going to write a book with 50 women. This is going to be my biggest commercial project I'd ever had. And I had decided for myself, this is a project I'd always wanted to do. I mean, I've written with less people, but 50 women, the topic would be exactly the same, because I knew what COVID was doing. COVID was unempowering women. It was putting women on a lower place, somewhere under the ladder. We were doing so well. And all of a sudden, these women were put in little box again, and there was no place for them. But women, what they asked, I just felt it. Women constantly need to be empowered by role models and good stories. And they don't need the exceptional story. They just need the common story that inspires and empowers. So I started my marketing, and I went online, and I did all these things. And within, I think, two and a half months, I had 50 women who wanted to write themselves into my book project.
Wow.
Which made it possible for me. And of course, the other projects I could still do, because I think in projects. So everything went online with my biggest and most prestigious project I'd ever done.
You are just fascinating, Lucinda Douglas.
Don't say that.
I am your protege. I'm your protege.
I love you.
I'm your protege. Seriously, you are just, because life is about learning from one another, interchanging the idea of being teacher and student.
Yes.
All at the same time.
Yes.
I teach you, you teach me, I learn from you, right? And so I love this interchange, because I always feel like I'm learning something, and
me too.
Good. So tell me, I want you to tell our listeners the story about, I want you to first tell them the story about the women that you were coaching.
Yes,
that you had them to go, the ones that you had them to go out on the street to get the money.
Oh, the
money. Because, and the reason why I want you to tell that story is because it is it's such a liberating story about capacity, right?
Yes,
you
absolutely.
push your clients to think past their capacity. right? And not think past their capacity, but to realize their capacities, right?
Yes,
And to think past their limitations. And
Mm-hmm.
during COVID, that's exactly what we all need, is those stories, as you say, that infect us and influence us, and let us see and know that it's possible to create what you think can't be created. So tell us a story about when you were coaching the group of women, and you sent them out to the streets to make some money.
Yes, well, it's a fun story. I've also done it with men.
Yes.
But this was great because I had this client, and she, this is probably a good example, not talking groups, but talking one, because it was very intense for her.
Yes.
I had learned this years ago, and I'd never thought I would ever apply it. And then one day I was coaching this woman because the company hired me because they had an account manager with a lot of potential, and it was the idea that she would become the commercial director. But to become the commercial director, she had to go through a process of learning and understanding and a bit of humbleness as well.
Mm-hmm.
But which school teaches you this? There is no school for this. And so she said to me, because she'd met me a few years earlier, and she said to me, Lucinda, I would want you to be the person who coaches me. And I said, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this? Because this could be one of the most intense moments in your life. Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, yes, I'm open for it. And I said, great. Well, I wrote the program. It was 4 months. And one day, after 3.5 months, I took her to a beautiful restaurant hotel on the one side of the river, in probably one of the oldest places in the Netherlands. It was built in the year 750, I think. Mm-hmm. So it's really old, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And every Saturday, they've got this huge market in the center with little cobblestones, and it's so absolutely idyllic and romantic. And I said to her, okay, this is how it works. I've taught you everything I know. And now I want you to capitalize. I want you to give it back to yourself, what you've learned. Because it's not true. I had never taught her everything I'd known. I had taught her what she needed to know. And I hoped more. But anyway, so what happens was, I said to her, could you please give your car keys to me and your wallets and everything? And I would give you a little book. I said, I'd give you this little book. And the idea is this: I want you to come back with 50 euros. I want you to come back with a bag full of groceries, and see to that you've got a kilo cheese and lettuce and tomatoes in there as well. But I'm not going to give you 1 cent. And she said, you can't do this to me. And there was this little ferry that takes you to the opposite side. And I said to her, listen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay the ferry. It's €1. I get you over the opposite side. And the only thing you need is an identification, because it's compulsory. You have your identification with you, but you've got no bank cards, you've got no telephone, you've got nothing. But I need you to come back with this, because this is going to determine how valuable you find yourself to be.
Wow.
So she came back with 2 of the shopping baskets with fruit and veg and cheese. And she came back with 35 euros. And I said to her, great, the 35 euros is actually shows me how valuable you find yourself in money. And that hurts. And that was the idea, because whatever she would bring back would be a reflection of her value. And I said, with this groceries, you can actually look after your family for a week. And that is amazing. And why that happens is we are capable of a whole lot, but we never stretch ourselves, because we never in the moment, in the place where we need to prove what we are worth. We never need to do this. But the question is, when you do it, what do you come back with? What do you bring home? When you decide to stand on the other side and there's nothing and there's nobody, do you tell your story to people? How do you get yourself visual? How do you get these people to be moved by what you are doing? And I said to her, start moving people, Because if you want to be the commercial director in a company, you're constantly going to be moving people, and there is no reason for them to want to be moved. And if you want to achieve things in life, you're going to be moving the impossible. So get yourself moving. And
wow. Wow. I love that. I love that story.
I do it. Lots of people are too afraid to go through this because they say, listen, don't do this to me.
It's frightening. First of all, it's frightening to people don't even want to leave the house without their cell phone.
Yes,
You think they want you to take their wallet and their keys and put them on a ferry over across the river and say go make some money and come back and talk to strangers, right?
Yes.
And essentially that's what you were telling her. Go talk to strangers, go show your value, like go and create something out of nothing. You know, and prove to yourself what you are worth, right? And prove to yourself your capacity to influence people. Like as the director, that's what she was going to have to do, influence people. So I absolutely love that story. So that brings me to give me a story about how you've helped a client to pivot during the pandemic. Have you worked with any women that you have helped to pivot during this pandemic? What has been the most compelling story, situation for you to experience?
Well, I think one of my women within L, because I still run L Mastermind. Mm-hmm. One of the women within L said to me, I think I was flabbergasted. I've never said to her that I was flabbergasted about it, but she said to me, Lucinda, we have experienced, because she's been in the program for 2.5 years, she doesn't want to leave. So she said to me, in this time that we've been doing this program, I have come to the conclusion, I've seen what it's like to work with men in boardrooms and how they relate to me and how they respect me and how they go about with me. I've decided to leave my husband.
Wow.
And I said, but well, she told me why. She had, it was a matter of, he couldn't give her what she needed. And she had always, she had, I'm looking for the proper word, but he was always in the lead. He was saying what is supposed to be happening, and she wanted to accommodate him all the time. But she was just filtering herself away year after year after year. And when she had experienced what we had experienced in these boardrooms and with people who were just so amazing, she said, I'm leaving him. And I said, okay, so what now? And she said, I had learned so much about not being afraid that I've decided that the minute I would be on my own and I would leave him, my tide would change. Everything would be different because I would be honest, true to myself, and it's going to happen. And I was, I'd know, because what we do is we always have business breakfasts still. I have to call it next week because we're going to have another business breakfast, and we have our business breakfast once every 2 weeks, where we start a business breakfast at 8:00 in the morning and we finish around 11, and they say, oh, it's lunchtime already. But we have these intense conversations because it's never only about business. It's about how you look at the world and how you see the world. And fear is one of the biggest drivers at this moment in time. Until you decide, and this is the conversations we've had countless amount of times, that fear is not going to play a role in our lives and it's not going to play a role in our business. And I'm not going to go into these conversations where people don't want to hug us or they don't value us. She said, I want to be hugged, I want to be valued, and I want to be loved.
Wow.
And that is made that yesterday I gave a masterclass, and she popped into the masterclass and she said, Lucinda, I've just attracted 2 amazing clients because I just went, she's a monument photographer, and I just gone photographing the castle this morning, close to where I live. And she said, I posted this on Instagram that I was photographing this castle, and all of a sudden 2 clients called me up and say, hey, we are this castle as well. Could you come and photograph what we have been doing there for the past few months?
Wow.
And could this project please continue? Because we just love the mere fact that you are living and you are visible, and you want to create and go further.
Wow. I think so many people during this pandemic are realizing the value of their relationships, right? Either how important they are or how much they need to change, and do some reevaluating within their relationships, whether it's your relationship with yourself or whether it's your relationship with your children or your mate or your best friend. I think that people are really evaluating relationships like never before.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, because you have to make choices. And yes, I noticed that the intensity is changing as well, because I called up, I still meet my clients, because they're great. So I called up one of my clients and I said to him, hey, listen, so how are you doing? And of course he says to me, my wife is gone. And I said, okay, so the wife is gone. I said, okay, probably this is all your fault, but let's not have the conversation now. He said, no, I can't have this conversation. Said,
right,
okay,
right.
So I'll meet for coffee with you next week, And what I like is the sincerity and the honesty about the relationship. I have a client of mine. I don't even know if they're my clients or my friends anymore, but I love them.
Yeah.
So he says to me, Lucinda, he runs a law firm, and he says to me, Lucinda, I need to lose 10 kilos because these are my Corona kilos. Could you be my accountable partner? So this is the relationship that I'm having, talking about my weight to my client, which is the most vulnerable part of me.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, I think that's a great idea. He said, okay, so I put in my agenda. We meet each other on the 17th of May. And we're having the salad for lunch. So the vulnerability, the intensity, the compassion and the love.
Yeah. I love that. That's, man. I was going to ask you, how are you helping your clients? But I see how you're helping your clients. You're always helping your clients, Lucinda.
I don't know. This is the part I don't know. I sometimes think I don't. There's a brand called Campina that we have in the Netherlands, and so they asked me whether I always go walking with my neighbor. He's 82 years old, and we walk 7-8 kilometers in the morning at 6:30. So eventually somebody picked up on the story and said, could we do a commercial with the two of you?
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
So, and why? The reason why is because lots of people, you can go walking with two people. So lots of people need to be inspired. They need to see, monkey see, monkey do. If they see it, they do it. So now we have, it's unsafe for me to go and walk in the mornings because we look like two celebrities. And I don't walk. He walks, and people are calling him up, and people are stopping him and saying, oh, it's you on the commercial.
Can you please send me that commercial?
I will.
Please.
I will.
I'm sure it's not, I know it's not in English, but can you please send me that commercial? I won't know anything it's saying. I won't know. It's in Dutch, right? It's in Dutch?
Yes, but it's not about, it's like especially the relationship and the love we have for each other. Yeah. That is what the whole commercial is about. And you can see it. It's a visual commercial. You can just see it. So it's
oh my God.
But that's great, right? It's got nothing to do with the business, but it's so intense.
That is just amazing. So as we close out, I want to share. So last year was one of the best years of my business world.
Woman.
My hair is like wet. My hair is so wet, and so it's dripping down my back. So if you're watching this, just know that I have wet, fresh hair. And I don't care anymore. It's just been dripping all down my back. Just the water, just water.
I was wondering, what is this woman doing? Tell me. I want to be inspired by you as well. Of course, this is an inspirational conversation.
Yes.
How did you manage to make 2020 your best year? Talk to me.
Oh my God. So it was my best year as well as one of my most challenging years. And not one of my most, it was challenging for a very different reason, but it was one of my best years in a long time, Lucinda. And so I started my real estate business. And a long story short, I've been a real estate agent for 3.5 years. Never really did a lot with my real estate license because I had always told myself when I came into real estate that I wanted to do work with investors and I wanted to be an investor. Well, I got the license and then I went in the opposite direction with what I had said. I did not keep my word to myself. And so I started trying to do residential real estate and it just didn't work for me. So at the end of 2019, I decided to start to work with investors. I committed myself to it. I learned about real estate investing, something called wholesaling, and I started doing that. And within a year's time, a little under a year's time, I was able to make $50,000 working a couple of hours a month doing this. And it was just like, I couldn't believe it because, I really needed it. I needed that extra 50K. But I showed myself something. I showed myself what I was capable of. In August alone, I made $25,000 just in August on one day. One day, right? So it was great, but something happened. Life happened. My uncle became ill in July. He was diagnosed with brain cancer. And my grandmother, who was like the love of my life, she started to decline physically and such. And we put them both in hospice care in July or August of last year. We put them both in hospice care. And this was in Ohio. So I was traveling back and forth from Maryland to Ohio. And I was her power of attorney. She had been his guardian, but I sort of was filling in now as his guardian for her. And as the power of attorney and all of that, there were a lot of decisions that had to be made. And it really took a physical and mental toll on me, a physical, mental, and emotional toll on me. And as a result of that, it affected my business. So last year with the pandemic, with my grandmother and my uncle, I could have easily done 150K last year. Easily.
I love it when you say that.
But it could have easily been done, and it will be done this year. But I had to take time to see to my loved ones. And in the midst of that, I realized that I operate in a business. I have a lifestyle brand. So I have Lily and Eve. I have Teray Homes Property Partners. And those two brands are my lifestyle brand, but they require me. They require my mental energy, they require my physical energy. They require Teray to be in the game. And especially on the real estate side, it requires me having my head in the game. And so, as a result, things just got really intense. So my uncle passed away September 25th of last year. And 2 weeks later, my grandmother passed October 9th.
My condolences.
So I buried them together, not buried them. We cremated, but we had their services on the exact same day. And just with so much family, just family challenges and everything, it was a lot of stress that came down on me. So when I talk about going to see the therapist, it was because I was overwhelmed with everything that happened. And I didn't realize that it had affected me the way in which it did. And I didn't realize it until I had days when I first got home after we had, laid them to rest. And I got home, Lucinda, and I slept for days. And I just slept for just hours and hours and hours. And I didn't realize what I was going through. There was a little bit of depression that was happening. There was so much stress that had built up in my body that I had to, but it was the best thing that could have happened to me because it made me reset. It made me take notice. it made me give more attention to Teray. And I just will never be the same because I was able to see myself and I was able to say, this is not what I want. And this is not going to help me get to where I am going. I have to reset, reprogram. I have to go and talk to somebody about what I'm feeling. And I have to give myself some grace. So I gave myself some grace. I allowed myself to sleep. I allowed myself to heal.
Yes.
I allowed myself to mourn. I just gave myself grace. And so 2020 was just an amazing year for a lot of reasons. And so I plan for 2021 to be absolutely just, if 2020 was amazing, 2021 is going to blow 2020 out the park.
I can't find the words to say how amazing this is, because reinventing yourself is one of the most difficult things, and looking at yourself from the other side, literally looking at yourself from the other side is one of the most confronting things and one of the most difficult things. But how amazing, because if you can do this, I find it to be incredibly inspiring, because you can change the outcome.
I literally was looking at myself almost falling apart. And what I realized when I talk about that therapy session that I had with that therapist, when she gave me the task of telling my story from the beginning to now, I realized how much trauma I had experienced and how much trauma had not been dealt with, how much trauma had been left unresolved. And it began a new process and a new journey of healing for me. And in order for us to become something new, as you said, we have to do something new. We have to do something we've never done before. And I had gone to therapists throughout my life. I believe that at different times in my life, I had seen different therapists and they helped me over the humps of life, right? These humps. But I'm looking to do things a lot differently this year. My goal this year is to become debt-free, to owe no one. My goal this year is to build a very lucrative and sustainable business. And I started to see, Lucinda, that for me, that all last year, I started catching myself being myself. And what do I mean by that? I was catching myself being myself.
I can imagine.
But so here's what was happening. I was catching myself having old fears and reacting to old fears. I was catching myself that fight or flight, like, okay, Teray, you're ready to run, but this is the time to stay. I was catching myself reacting to life as opposed to responding or just having a moment and accepting it, right? And saying, I don't have to have a reaction. I don't have to do anything. I can just allow it to be. Yes. So I started catching myself being my old self and realizing that I had some behaviors that were repetitive, that were not serving me. And I had these behaviors for years, decades. And so I started to break old patterns, and in breaking those old patterns, starting to create something new. I don't know who this new person is, but I know that she's more powerful. Her. She's more powerful. She's more informed. Yes. She's more in tune. I follow Abraham Hicks, and she says, you got to be tapped in, tuned in, tapped in, turned on, right? Tuned in, tapped in, turned on. And so she's more tuned in, tapped in, and turned on to her own self. And that's what I've been up to. That's what I've been up to, Lucinda.
Tuned in, tapped in, turned on.
Yes. And so she says, one of us is who is tuned in, tapped in, and turned on is more powerful than millions of us who are not.
Yes. I'm going to write that down. Tuned in, tapped in,
turned on.
and turned on.
And that's Abraham Hicks. I follow her, and I did a lot of listening to her last year as I was going through what I was going through. And so, yeah, it was a beautiful journey. I lost two of the most dearest people to me, but I learned a lot about me, and I learned a lot about some people whom I thought were one way and they turned out to be another way. And that was okay too, because I needed to learn and see people for who they were, not for who I wanted them to be.
No.
And I saw myself for that too. You know, I saw the truth of who I was, right? And the things I needed to do to shift my own life forward. I had to change some old thought, some old beliefs, right?
Wow.
Some old habits, some old patterns. And so I'm still working. I'm not there, but I'm on that journey. So I'm having these conversations on the Teray Holmes Show.
Oh, I love it.
It's all about business and love and life, right?
Yes.
And, we discuss a whole lot of life, a whole lot of business, and a whole lot of love. And that's really, that's my passion. And I'm just so grateful to have people like you to be able to share this with. And I can't wait to have you back on the show, Lucinda.
Well, I'm thinking, because I love what you're saying about, you were just saying you had to change those old beliefs, those old ideas, and you found yourself in certain moments. But it's so humbling, and it is so amazing and so true that you are never a standalone. Everything in your life is all about what you experience, how you feel. If you need to sleep a month, you need to sleep a few days, you need to reassess, you need to find yourself. It affects everything about you. Mm-hmm. Your business and your life is one and all part of the package deal. And I think lots of people still think that they can split themselves. They are still the split personalities, but it's impossible. You have to be honest and true to yourself. And about loving yourself, it's one of the most unspoken of things in the world. And we all know, to be able to love the next person, you need to love yourself.
You leave me speechless often.
No, you do that to me.
But when you talk about not being able to disconnect the two, last year taught me that. Last year taught me that, Teray, you can't, those two things coexist. Your business and your life coexist. And if you are not good in your life, if you're not well within your soul, if you are not peaceful within your soul, if you are not happy, if you are not, able to think clearly, it's going to affect your business and
relationships
and my relationships and everything else. And so, but I felt guilty for the fact that I needed to sleep. I felt guilty for the fact that I needed to, that business that I didn't make $150K last year. I felt guilty for that. But after feeling guilty, I came back and realized that, but you took care of your family, and you took care of yourself, and you slept when you needed to sleep, and you ate when you needed to eat, and you did the things you needed to do for you. And that was all you could do. Now I am well with my soul.
I know that song. It's well with your soul. What I'm going to do with you is I'm going to leave you, because otherwise it becomes too much of the good stuff all at the same time.
Lucinda,
I love you
so
for
much for this conversation. Thank you. I love you more. I can't wait till we do it again.
We're going to do this.
This has been amazing. So tell me, leave us with one word of advice that you would give to anyone who is struggling to stay afoot, who is struggling during this pandemic to get back to regroup, regain, renew, what would one piece of advice be?
There are always more options.
Mm.
There are always more options. The mere fact that you can't find it doesn't mean that they aren't there. They are there. And we need to look differently, act differently, look in different places of ourselves as well, but it's there.
Love it. Thank you, the Yes You Can woman, Lucinda Douglas.
Now, if I could give you a big kiss, I would, but virtually, I think it'll be just fine. So, thank you. And I'm going to speak to you soon. We should do this like more often than this. I think lots of people are